When you're young, the idea of babysitting sounds simple enough. Watch some kids, make some money, maybe watch Netflix or mess around on your phone when they fall asleep. But what happened to me? It was anything but simple. It was a rainy Friday night in late October when I took on a babysitting job for the Johnson family. I was 19 at the time, a college student just trying to get by. They lived in a quiet suburban neighborhood about 20 minutes outside of town. Nothing unusual about it, at least not on the surface. The parents, Mark and Jennifer, were going out for a fancy dinner, and their two kids, Luke and Sophie, were fast asleep by the time I arrived. The house was warm and cozy and smelled like fresh-baked cookies. Everything seemed perfect, normal, almost too normal. Little did I know that the peace wouldn't last. I spent the first hour cleaning up the kitchen and scrolling through social media. It was the kind of night when time didn't seem to move. I remember sitting on the couch, trying to distract myself with a video, the only sound in the house being the soft hum of the refrigerator. Everything felt too still, but the calm was deceptive. Around 10 p.m. I heard a soft noise from upstairs, a light thud followed by a creak. It sounded like footsteps. I figured it was just Sophie or Luke stirring in their sleep. They were both pretty young, and I'd read somewhere that kids have nightmares, so it didn't seem like anything out of the ordinary. But then it happened again. A soft, deliberate thud, but this time it was closer. I froze, waiting for any sign of movement from the kids upstairs, but the house remained eerily quiet. At this point, I should have gone upstairs and checked on them, but something about the sound, something about how deliberate it was, stopped me. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. I told myself my imagination was running wild, so I pushed the thought away. But then the thudding sound came again, much louder this time, followed by something that made my heart drop into my stomach. The sound of whispering, soft, unintelligible whispers coming from somewhere near the top of the stairs. I stood up from the couch, my heart racing. The whispers were getting more apparent, like a conversation, but I couldn't make out any words. I turned toward the stairs, hesitant. Something wasn't right. I don't know why I thought it was okay to go upstairs. I should have called the parents, or at the very least, gotten my phone out and dialed 911, but I didn't. I was scared, sure, but I was also too curious, and to be honest, I was embarrassed. Who was I, an adult, to be scared of some strange noises? So I walked upstairs, my footsteps muffled on the carpet as I reached the hallway. The whispering had stopped, and for a moment there was nothing. Absolute silence. I checked Sophie's room first. She was sound asleep, tucked in tight with her stuffed bunny in her arms. No sign of any disturbance. I breathed a sigh of relief. Then I moved to Luke's room. His door was cracked open. It was dark inside, but I could just make out the faint shape of his bed, the blanket, and something else, a figure standing by the window. I couldn't see its face, but I could see the silhouette, a tall, thin figure standing completely still. My heart stopped. The figure didn't move, didn't acknowledge me at all. I should have screamed, I should have run, but instead I just stood there, rooted to the spot. Then it turned, slowly, like it was aware I was there, but wasn't in any hurry to react. The face I saw wasn't human. It was pale and gaunt, and its eyes were unnaturally wide, too broad to be real. Its lips twisted into something between a grin and a grimace, and it didn't blink once. It was as if the face was frozen, locked in some nightmarish expression. I couldn't move, I couldn't breathe. I wanted to scream, but my throat was dry. I tried to run, but my legs were paralyzed. The figure stepped forward. My mind was screaming at me to run, but I couldn't. And then it spoke. It wasn't a whisper. It was clear and cold, like it was inside my head. You shouldn't have come here. The figure lunged at me at that moment, but I couldn't process what happened next. Everything went black. When I woke up, I was in the living room, sitting on the couch, my face cold and wet. I had no memory of how I got there. I glanced at the clock, 3 a.m. The house was utterly still. For a moment, I thought I had dreamed the whole thing. But then I remembered the figure, the eyes, the voice, and a feeling of dread settled over me. Something was very wrong. I stood up slowly, every part of me screaming at me to leave. But I couldn't leave without knowing what happened to Luke and Sophie. I had to check on them. I crept back upstairs, but I didn't hear anything this time. No thuds, no whispers. The house was eerily silent. Luke's room was empty. Sophie's door. I felt a cold chill run down my spine. I ran to the bathroom, the kitchen, and every room in the house, but the kids were nowhere to be found. Panic began to set in. I grabbed my phone to call the parents, but couldn't get a signal. I tried dialing 911, but it was the same. Nothing. I rushed back downstairs, pacing the living room, my mind racing. What was going on? Where were the kids? That's when I heard it again. Like a soft knocking, a faint tapping sound came from the front door. I hesitated. I didn't want to open the door. I didn't even want to know who was on the other side, but something pushed me toward it. I reached out for the handle. When I opened the door, there was nothing. No one. But lying on the doorstep just outside was a small dirty shoe, one of Luke's shoes. I didn't know what to do. I had no idea what was happening, if anyone else was involved or if the kids had somehow wandered off. But then, the most chilling part occurred. I glanced up, and from the corner of my eye I saw someone watching me from the upstairs window. I couldn't see who it was, but the figure was back, and it was looking directly at me. I ran out of the house. I don't even know why I didn't call the authorities. Maybe I was too scared, or maybe I thought they wouldn't believe me. I never saw the Johnsons again. A week later, they moved out. The house was sold to someone else, and I never got a chance to ask the new owners if they'd seen anything strange. But sometimes when I'm lying in bed, just on the verge of sleep, I hear that soft tapping noise again, and I always know it's the same thing. The exact figure watching from the dark. Maybe it was all in my head, perhaps it wasn't. But I'll never be able to forget the feeling that something is still out there. But what if that wasn't the end? What if the watcher is still out there, waiting to be discovered? What happened to the kids? Where did they go? And why did they leave that shoe on the doorstep? After what happened that night, I thought I'd finally put it behind me. You know how it goes. Life goes on, things change, and the fear fades, or at least that's what I thought. But the night I left the Johnson house was just the beginning. I didn't know it then, but I was only scratching the surface of something much darker. Something that was already watching, waiting for the right moment to make its move. It's been months since I stepped foot in that house, and still I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. It wasn't just a passing feeling. It was like someone was behind me, just out of sight. The kind of sensation that makes your heart race for no reason. The whispers never stopped. They were initially subtle, just out of earshot, like something you think you hear when you're half asleep. But they always came back. No matter where I was or what I did, the whispers would return. And then the dreams started. Every night, without fail, I dreamed of the Johnson house. The long hallway, the window, the figure. Sometimes I was in the house searching for the kids, hearing their faint cries from upstairs. Other times I was outside, standing in the yard, watching the house from the darkness, feeling the weight of someone's gaze on me. It was during one of those dreams that I saw them again, Sophie and Luke. They were standing in the window, just like the figure had, but this time their faces were pale, twisted. Their eyes were wide, staring at me with that same awful expression. And then they spoke, both of them in unison. "You're not safe." I woke up drenched in sweat, my heart pounding. It had always been the same dream, the same warning. I tried to ignore it. Life had to go on, right? I couldn't stay stuck in the past forever. So, I moved on with my life. College started back up, and I found a new place to live. I even got a new babysitting gig just to keep my head clear. But one night, while walking back to my apartment, I passed by the Johnson house. The for sale sign had been replaced with a new one, sold. The house had new owners. I didn't even realize it until I saw a family unloading boxes from a moving truck. Something about it bothered me. That feeling of unease, the one I'd lived with ever since that night, flared up again. I couldn't explain why, but I needed to know more. I wasn't sure what I expected to find, but something was pulling me toward that house. It was then I saw her. A woman in her mid-30s, standing on the porch watching the movers. Her eyes met mine for a brief moment, and something in her expression sent a cold shiver down my spine. It wasn't fear, but something more knowing. Something unsettling. I turned away quickly, not wanting to draw attention to myself, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I had seen her before. The woman's face haunted me, as if I had known her in another life, but where, when? The next day I decided to investigate. I took a walk through the neighborhood, hoping to casually encounter someone who might know more about the new tenants. Sure enough, I ran into an older woman who lived 2 houses down from the Johnsons. Her name was Mrs., Thompson, and she had lived in the neighborhood for over 20 years. I asked her if she knew anything about the new family. Her response was enough to freeze me in place. "Oh yes, the Johnsons. They were a nice family. Lived here for a few years. But well, it was just so sudden when they moved out. Real quiet like, you know?" She paused, looking around before lowering her voice. "I heard strange noises coming from that house after they left. I thought it was just the house settling, but then things got weirder. I don't know if you've heard, but there's something about that house, something not right." I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. I tried to push her for more details, but she clammed up, mumbling about her garden and walking away quickly. It didn't make sense. The Johnsons had left in the middle of the night, no explanation, no word to the neighbors, just gone. The house sold so quickly, too quickly, like it was a hush-hush deal. And the new family, what was it about them? Why did I feel like I knew that woman? I decided to stop by the house later that evening. It was too much to ignore. As the sun began to set, I stood in front of the Johnson house. It looked the same, almost too much the same. The lawn had been manicured, the porch freshly painted, and the windows intact, but something felt off. I stepped closer to the front door, and that's when I saw it, a shadow in the window. It wasn't the figure from before, no. This time it was something far worse. A child's face, pale, gaunt, eyes too wide, pressed against the glass. They were staring directly at me, unblinking, unmoving. It was like they knew I was there, but it wasn't a friendly gaze. It was the same as the one I'd seen in my dreams. Stumbled back, almost falling on the lawn, my mind was racing. I knew I had to get out of there, but something kept pulling me toward the window. The child's eyes were still locked on mine, and I could feel a strange pull in my chest as if they were calling me. I shook my head, forcing myself to look away. This was insane. I wasn't going to fall for this again. I turned on my heel and hurried down the path, only to hear something that made my blood run cold, the whispers. They were faint at first, but they grew louder the farther I walked. "You should never have come back." I froze in place, feeling like the ground beneath me had turned to ice. Slowly, I turned to face the house again. The window was empty now. No more face, no more shadow. But I couldn't shake the feeling. The whispers weren't just in my head. Someone was out there. Someone was watching me. I started to back away, but then I saw it. The woman I had seen earlier was standing on the porch again, watching me. Her expression was unreadable, but this time her eyes seemed different. There was no hint of recognition, no warmth, just a chilling emptiness. Before I could move, she spoke. "You should leave. Now." I didn't hesitate. I turned and ran. But as I reached the end of the street, I heard something that made me stop dead in my tracks. A voice, soft, almost a whisper, came from the woods behind the house. "It's too late." Turned around, my heart racing, but there was no one there. The woods were just dark shadows, still and silent. I wasn't alone. Whatever was happening here wasn't over. In fact, it was just beginning. And I had no idea what I had just walked into. After that night, I thought I had reached the breaking point. I thought I'd seen enough to understand that the Johnson house was no ordinary home, and that whatever was happening there, it wasn't something I could simply walk away from. But I didn't know the half of it. The deeper I dug, the more I realized that something far darker had been set in motion long before I ever walked into that house. And as much as I wanted to run, as much as I wished I could turn my back on everything, something kept pulling me back. Something was still watching. The next morning, I couldn't stop thinking about what had happened the night before. The whispers, the child's face at the window, the woman who had told me to leave. Everything felt like a warning that was meant to be ignored, but I couldn't do it. I had to know what was happening. I went to the local library and started digging into the history of the house. I knew the Johnsons hadn't been there long, but something told me this house wasn't new to strange occurrences. I needed answers. It didn't take long to find something disturbing. The house was built in the early 1900s, but that wasn't what caught my attention. What bothered me were the previous owners, 2 children, the ones who had left the house abruptly, just like the Johnsons had. The authorities never found out why they went, and rumors swirled about the place being haunted. But it was the date that really sent a chill down my spine. The family had moved out in 1983. That was the same year the house had burned down, but not in a way you'd expect. It wasn't a fire caused by faulty wiring or a kitchen accident. No, the fire was deliberate. Someone had set it. And when the fire was finally put out, investigators found something horrifying inside, a child's body. The little boy, about 8 years old, had been found in the basement. His body badly burned, but his eyes wide open, like he had been awake the whole time. He had been there for weeks before the fire had even started, but the most chilling part, they never found out who the child was. The couple who lived there, the ones who'd left after the fire, had no explanation. They didn't even seem to know who the boy was, and the fire was never fully investigated. The authorities had written it off as an accident, but I knew better. I knew this wasn't some random incident. I wasn't sure what to think, but everything inside me screamed that this had something to do with the strange occurrences I'd been experiencing. I couldn't shake the feeling that the woman I had seen on the porch, whoever she was, knew more than she was letting on. There was something in her eyes when she looked at me. Something, knowing, so I decided to go back to the house. I knew it was risky, but I had to find out who she was. She couldn't just tell me to leave and expect me to listen. When I arrived at the house, it was a quiet afternoon. The sun was just starting to set, casting long shadows across the lawn. The front door was open, the movers long gone, and everything seemed eerily calm. I stood on the porch for a moment, gathering my courage. Then I knocked. It was she who answered. The same woman, the one I couldn't shake from my mind. She stood in the doorway, staring at me for a long moment, her face impassive. "You again," she said softly, as though she'd been expecting me. "Didn't I tell you to leave?" I took a deep breath, pushing past my fear. I had to get answers. "I need to know who you are," I said, my voice shaking. "What happened here? What happened to the Johnsons?" Her gaze darkened. For a moment I thought she might slam the door in my face, but instead she stepped aside, gesturing for me to come in. "You're asking questions that don't need to be asked," she said, her voice low. "Some things are better left unknown." But I couldn't stop now. When I stepped inside, the air felt wrong. It was thick and oppressive, like something was pressing against my chest. The house had an unsettling stillness, almost like it was holding its breath, waiting for something. As I walked through the hallway, I caught sight of something out of the corner of my eye, a shadow darting quickly across the room. My heart skipped a beat, but when I turned to look, there was nothing there. I swallowed hard. "Who are you?" I asked again, but the woman didn't answer. She led me into the kitchen, where the lights flickered overhead. "There are things in this house you don't understand," she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Things that don't belong here." My curiosity was getting the better of me now. "What things?" I pressed, almost frantic. She looked at me for a long moment, as though considering whether or not she should tell me the truth. Then, in the most unsettling tone, she spoke. "This house, it's been cursed for a long time, and the thing that haunts it is the boy, the one who died in the fire." I felt my blood run cold. But you said the fire was an accident," I stammered, trying to piece things together. She shook her head, a dark smile creeping across her lips. "It wasn't an accident. The boy wasn't supposed to die. He was part of the house, part of the curse." I didn't understand. What was she talking about? How could a child be part of a curse? She didn't explain any further. Instead, she stood up abruptly, her eyes wide with a strange, haunted expression. "You need to leave right now before it's too late." As I turned to leave, I felt a cold draft rush past me. The air in the house seemed to grow colder, the walls closing in. I wasn't sure if it was just my nerves or something more, but I felt as though I was being watched. I glanced back at the woman, who had now moved to the window, her back turned to me. That's when I saw it. In the reflection of the glass, I could see a child's face, pale, thin, eyes wide and unblinking, staring right at me from the darkness behind the woman. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. Before I could react, the woman turned sharply to face me. Her eyes were wild now, almost pleading. "Don't look at him, don't look at the boy." But it was too late. In that instant, I realized the truth. The boy from the fire, he wasn't just dead. He was still there, still lingering in the house, watching, waiting, and somehow I had become part of it. I had become a part of his story. Suddenly, the house felt alive. The air was thick with something unseen, something ancient, something that had been waiting for this moment. I couldn't breathe. The child's face, those wide, unblinking eyes, were everywhere now, in the corners of the room, in the windows, staring at me. I turned to run, but as I reached the door, I heard a soft whisper, so close it felt like it was inside my head. "You'll never leave." And just as I stepped into the doorway, I heard the unmistakable sound of footsteps behind me. Heavy, deliberate, growing closer. I turned around. There was no one there, but I could feel him. He was right behind me. Will I make it out alive? Will I uncover the truth behind the boy in the fire? Or is there more to this curse than I ever imagined? I should have known the moment I stepped into that house that there was no escaping it. That feeling, the one that crawls up your spine and freezes you to the spot, wasn't just fear. It was a warning, a sign that I was already too far in, too deep to pull back. What happened next wasn't just about the boy anymore. It was about something far older, something that had been buried in that house long before any of us ever walked through the door. I had barely managed to stumble out of the kitchen when I felt it. The weight, the pressure in the air, so thick that it almost hurt to breathe. The walls seemed to close in, and the floor creaked beneath my feet like the house itself was alive, watching, listening. The woman, I don't even know what to call her anymore, was still standing by the window, her back turned to me. I couldn't get her words out of my head. Don't look at him, don't look at the boy. But I couldn't help it. I couldn't help the way my eyes were drawn to the dark corners of the room, to the shadows that seemed to move of their own accord. It was as if something was waiting for me to notice it. Then it hit me. The boy who had died in the fire, he wasn't just part of the house. He wasn't just a lingering spirit seeking revenge. No, this was something worse. The boy was a vessel, a conduit. Whatever was in the house, whatever had been feeding off the fear and suffering for decades was in him. And it wasn't just some random haunting. It was a curse that bound the house, the land, and the families that lived there. The woman turned to face me then, her eyes wide with desperation. "You don't understand. This isn't just a house, it's a prison. The boy isn't the only one here, he's just the first. They were all supposed to die, all of them, and you're next." I was frozen, my heart pounding in my chest. Her words were like nails scraping against the walls of my mind. What did she mean, next? But before I could ask, someone moved behind her, the child. I saw him, his face pale and lifeless, eyes wide, staring directly at me. But there was no warmth in those eyes, no humanity. It was like looking into a void. I opened my mouth to scream, but nothing came out. The boy began to move, slowly, deliberately. His feet dragged across the floor as if he were being pulled by invisible strings. But as he got closer, I realized something that made my blood run cold. There were more shadows in the room now, more figures emerging from the darkness. At first they were vague shapes, flickers at the edge of my vision, but then they became clearer. One by one, the spirits of children, some burned beyond recognition, some with broken, twisted faces, emerged from the darkness, surrounding me. The woman's voice was a soft whisper now, barely audible over the low hum of the growing presence in the room. "They're all here, the children who never left." I felt my legs give way beneath me, but I didn't fall. I couldn't move. I could barely breathe as the figures moved closer, their eyes locking onto mine. Each one of them had the same hollow, empty stare. And each of them was more unsettling than the last. Their eyes seemed to pierce into me, digging into my soul. They didn't speak, they didn't need to. Their presence alone was enough to make me feel like I was suffocating. I tried to run, tried to push past them, but my feet wouldn't obey. The air grew colder, the shadows growing longer, stretching toward me like dark fingers. And then I heard it. A voice, soft at first, almost a whisper. "You shouldn't have come back." It was the boy. His distant voice echoed from every corner of the room at once, 1,000 whispers layered on top of each other. Then the temperature dropped even further, and the shadows started to move faster, swirling around me. I could hear them now, the faint, rattling breaths of the spirits that surrounded me, each one closer than the last. I turned toward the door, desperate to escape, but the woman had moved in front of it. She was blocking the exit. Her face had changed. There was no longer any warmth in her eyes. She was different. Her features twisted into something grotesque, like a mask, a puppet controlled by some unseen force. "You don't get to leave," she hissed. Her voice was no longer her own. It was deeper, more guttural. Not until the boy has you, not until all of them have you. Suddenly, the floor beneath me shifted. The house groaned as if it were alive, its beams creaking and groaning under the weight of something ancient, something that had been slumbering for years. I could hear the whispers again, but they weren't coming from the children anymore. No, this was something else. The walls seemed to close in, the shadows stretching toward me, and the voices in my head growing louder and more insistent. You should have stayed away. Now it's too late. I knew I had to get out. I had to do something before the shadows took me. But the door, the only way out, was blocked by the woman. And the child, the one who had started it all, was standing in front of me now, too close. It was then that I remembered the one thing I had read during my research. The house wasn't just cursed because of the boy who died. No, there was something more. The boy was only the beginning. The real curse was tied to the land itself. It had always been there. The house was built on ancient blood-soaked soil. Long before the Johnsons, long before the other families who lived there, the land had been a site of ritual sacrifice. And I realized then, in that moment, the truth of the house. It wasn't just haunted, it was alive. The spirits weren't simply trapped there, they were feeding off the living. Curse wasn't just a consequence of death. It was a purpose. To drag the living into the shadows, to trap them in the same endless cycle of fear, to bring them into the fold of the restless dead. I turned toward the woman, the realization crashing down on me. I had to destroy the house, destroy the curse, but how? Before I could move, I heard something that made my blood freeze. You can't destroy what's already been born. I spun around to see the boy, his face now fully formed, his eyes not just wide but gleaming with malice. It's too late. Suddenly the shadows lunged at me. I screamed, but the darkness swallowed my voice. My vision blurred and the child's face came closer, impossibly close, the twisted grin stretching wider. I fought against it, pushing back, trying to break free. But I could feel the cold wrapping around me, pulling me in. It was too much, too fast. The shadows were suffocating me. And then, just as I felt my consciousness start to sleep away, I heard one final whisper, this time clear, unmistakable. It's not just the house that wants you. And then darkness. What is it that's truly behind the curse? Who or what is controlling the spirits? And will I ever escape? For what felt like an eternity, I was trapped in that suffocating darkness, the cold shadows pulling me deeper into their grasp. But then, just as I was sure I was lost forever, something changed. The voices, those endless whispers, those haunting murmurs of the spirits faded into silence. The overwhelming weight pressing down on me lifted, like a fog rolling away in the dead of night. I opened my eyes, unsure of what I would see, but there was no more shadow, no more figures, only the house. But it was different now. The walls were cracked, the foundation shaking as though the very bones of the house were crumbling under the pressure of its own cursed existence. The boy was standing in front of me once more, but his face was no longer twisted in agony, no longer the empty shell of a lost soul. No, now he was clear. His eyes no longer gleamed with malice. Instead, there was something else, something I had never expected. Fear. He was afraid too, fearful of what was coming. But what was coming? I didn't have time to think. The air around me grew cold again, the shadows crawling back into every corner of the room, every crack in the walls. And then in the deepest part of the house I saw it, a doorway. I had never seen it before, had never noticed it. But there it was, standing open as though it had been waiting for me to find it all along. It beckoned me, drawing me in with a force I couldn't resist. Without thinking, I ran. I ran through the crumbling house, the whispers starting up again, louder, more frantic, like the house itself was alive, trying to stop me from reaching that door. But I couldn't stop. Not now. Not after everything I had seen. I couldn't let it win. I reached the door. It was old and wooden, covered in what looked like ancient symbols that seemed to glow faintly in the darkness. My hand trembled as I reached for the handle, and when I touched it, the house let out a violent groan as though it was protesting. With one final burst of strength, I yanked the door open, and then I saw it, the heart of the house. A massive, shadowy entity, ancient beyond measure, pulsing with an unnatural energy. It wasn't just the boy who had been trapped in this place. It was the source of all the spirits, the curse that had bound this house to the land for centuries. The entity was feeding off their fear of my fear. I didn't know how, but I felt it then. The power of the house, the curse fading. The boy's face flashed in front of me one last time, his eyes filled with both relief and sorrow. Then it was over. The house trembled and shook, and suddenly it felt as though I wasn't in the same place anymore. The walls were no longer crumbling, the shadows were gone, and the suffocating weight was lifted. The boy was gone, and the air felt lighter. The curse had been broken. I stumbled out of the house, breathless, shaken. Behind me, the house stood silent, still like nothing had ever happened. But I knew better. I knew the truth now. The house wasn't just a place. It was a prison for the cursed, the lost, the restless. And even though I had escaped, part of me knew that the darkness would always be there, waiting for someone else to cross its threshold. But for now, I was free. So, that's it. The mystery of the Johnson house has finally been solved, at least for me. But I'm sure you have your own theories. Was the curse really lifted? Or is something still lurking in the shadows, waiting for the next unsuspecting soul to come too close? I want to hear what you think. Drop your thoughts, theories, and speculations in the comments below. Did I miss something? Or is there still more to this terrifying story than we can even begin to understand? And hey, if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on that notification bell so you won't miss out on any more creepy stories. You never know what I'll uncover next. You'll want to stay tuned, trust me. Comment below and let me know what you think happened after the house was destroyed. Who or what might still be out there? And remember, I post new videos every week, so make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss the next terrifying tale. Keep your lights on, and be careful who you trust. You never know who or what is watching. Stay safe, and remember, the dark never forgets.